In the years of anxiety before the First World War, the Jewish-born composer Gustav Mahler sounded a new tone in German symphonic music. A tone of ambivalence and menace. Visions of a remote world of peace are threatened by violence. This music is rooted in 150 years of German symphonic thought, but its nervousness and sense of foreboding are characteristic of Jewish art and thought in the early 20th century. They open the way to the modernist movement and mark the beginning of the end of many things for the Western world. Mahler's music, with its debt to Richard Wagner, is both powerfully German and intensely Jewish. It is also a summation, a farewell, and an omen. It has been said that Mahler told what was coming in the language of the past, and he knew very well that he was paving the way for a new era in music. What he could not see was that the epoch that was ending was to signal also the end of a remarkable period of harmony and mutual enrichment between Germans and Jews. Nor could he know that Germany was soon to visit on European Jewry a cataclysm of violence, hatred, and unimaginable terror that would condemn his own niece, Alma Rosé, to imprisonment in a Nazi death camp, and bring to an end a process of Jewish assimilation into German society, which had lasted for more than 100 years, and in which music had played such a significant role.
It is not by chance that so many of the greatest lights in music who enriched humanity immeasurably are Germans. So there is something in the German nature which gives us music, and it is a question of you have it in your nature, you cultivate it, it gets deeper into your nature, etc., from generation to generation. Yes. It is very tragic that the Germans and the Jews, you see the Mashmidim, the exterminators and the exterminated, the persecutors and the victim, they meet on the ground of music. You see, for me, it is not easy to listen to the Matthäus Passion or St. John's Passion, because we are accused there of something very terrible. But the music is such that you cannot withstand it.
German music was a latecomer in the European concert. And yet, when it came, its first great master, Johann Sebastian Bach, was to become a point of reference for everything that followed. For many, the most universal, the most expressive, and the most technically accomplished musician who ever lived. He was also the most mystical.
This is like the Bible. I would compare Bach with Bible. The book of humanity and the music of humanity. This is the same language, actually. The same language. Beethoven and Mozart learned from him. He inspired all. So he is an inventor. He is a source of this beauty.
And so began the music that was to become a cornerstone of musical expression in the Western world for the next 200 years and more. The reasons are not far to seek. They lie in the work of a whole host of composers and performers, from Bach to Schoenberg, who built the German musical tradition. But the early years, from Bach to the Viennese classicism of Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven, came too soon for the Jews to participate, because music was sustained by the church and the closed aristocratic circles from which the Jews were excluded.
So as foreigners, even though we had the passports, as foreigners, we were always put behind a shtetl, behind some sort of a wall. And therefore, in order to preserve our identity and Jewishkeit, we did basically three things. Made a lot of children. There were 8 to 10 children in every family. My father had 8 brothers and sisters. The religion played a huge factor. And I'm not just talking about Passover services, really learning the Talmud, understanding the nuances of the sentences, of all those mavens for many, many years before that put this down as a way to follow. And then for entertainment, we played music. Because we sang, there was a lot of singing going on. In my childhood, there was a tremendous amount of singing. The Passover thing took 4 hours, with more singing than eating. All kinds of songs.
In the temple, when Solomon instituted it, music was at the heart of the worship. And when the temple was destroyed in AD 70, from then on, within Judaism, there was never to be full music until the temple would be recreated. But the concept of music, music as coming from God, music as being a consolation, a joy, music as one of the great elements which would enhance a community, that concept remained very powerful. So as soon as the ghettos were opened, as soon as Jews were emancipated, it meant that the concept and the love of music, which had been nurtured over so many generations, hundreds, indeed thousands of years, could suddenly emerge and blossom as never before.
But opportunities remained limited. Legal emancipation was uneven in the German states. And it was only with the founding of the German Empire in 1871 that all Jews in Germany finally received full legal emancipation. Even then, the shadow persisted.
We were foreign objects. When you're a foreign person in a land, you want to be better. You want to achieve status, economic status. Individual status is somebody that's recognized not just by the fact that they're Jewish or from a different, or looks different. You want to stand out. And that's what German music does. It makes you stand out.
It's terribly important to stress how at home in Germany, culturally, many Jews felt. And it was absolutely typical that Rabbi Stein in 1840 proclaimed, "Only in our beliefs are we Israelites. Our only fatherland is Germany." That was a typical view of an educated German. That said, the majority of wealthy or influential or cultured Jews, in order to fit fully into German society, converted to Christianity.
Juden sind immer eine Minorität und sind, wo auch immer sie sind, nicht wirklich zu Hause. Und Minoritäten, die sich nicht unbedingt sicher fühlen, obwohl man hat sich leider viel zu sicher in Deutschland gefühlt, da wo man Minorität ist und nicht 100%ig sicher ist, gibt es immer diese Tendenz, excellent zu sein. mindestens so gut wie die Leute, die hier wohnen, und dann aus Versehen wird man ein bisschen besser. Und das ist natürlich unsere Todsünde.
And in their eagerness, they basically were too good. They exceeded everybody else. They overtook everybody else. They dominated academia. They dominated the law. They dominated science. They dominated medicine. They dominated the arts. And their ambition was not to submerge German culture in Jewish culture. Quite the opposite. Their ambition was to contribute to German culture.
Assimilation proceeded surprisingly quickly, despite developing anti-Semitism. And Germany soon became the most tolerant of the Central European states, with Prussia among the most liberal. And so it's no surprise that the first great German composer of Jewish origin was wealthy, Prussian, and baptized into the Christian faith. Felix Mendelssohn was born on the 3rd of February 1809 into a family which stands as the great emblem of the meeting of the German and Jewish spirits in the 19th century. His grandfather, Moses Dessau, or Moses Mendelssohn as he came to call himself, was born in 1729 when J.S. Bach was 44 years old. He became a leading thinker of the Enlightenment, a fighter for Jewish freedom and a powerful advocate of religious tolerance. He saw reason as the best hope for Jews and Germans alike. Moses Mendelssohn became a key figure in Jewish-German relations at the most critical period for Jewish emancipation in Germany. A founding father of the dream of fruitful, unproblematic assimilation of the Jews into German society. He was not loved by all because of the secularizing tendency of his thinking, but he was, without doubt, the most powerful voice calling for a synthesis of Jewishness and Germanness. His son Abraham converted to Christianity and became one of Berlin's most successful bankers. He, in turn, baptized his own son Felix into the Lutheran Church in his 7th year.
Four years after baptizing his son, Abraham Mendelssohn confirmed his daughter Fanny into the Lutheran Church and wrote to her explaining his reasons. The outward form of religion which your teacher has given you is historical, and like all human institutions, subject to change. Thousands of years ago, the Jewish form was the dominant one. Then came the heathen, and now it's the Christian. Your mother and I were born and brought up by our parents as Jews, but we've been able to follow our divine instincts and conscience. We've educated you and your brothers and sister in the Christian faith, because it's the faith of most civilized people and contains nothing that can draw you away from what is good, and much that guides you to love, obedience, tolerance, and acceptance, even if it offered nothing but the example of its founder, understood by so few and followed by still fewer.
Felix accepted his father's wishes with conviction, and at his request took the name Mendelssohn Bartholdy, his father insisting that a Christian composer with the name of Mendelssohn made no sense.
Mendelssohn was the most important Protestant composer of the 19th century. He was able to take the traditions of classicism and the Baroque and convert them into a romantic sensibility to reach a wide, believing public in the Protestant Lutheran community. Mendelssohn's relation to this question is very, very interesting. He viewed Protestantism to be the outgrowth of Judaism. So Judaism was rendered obsolete. So he was not himself caught by any kind of self-reproach by being Jewish. He was proud to have entered the modern world the way we would abandon a typewriter for a computer. It was no insult to the typewriter, but the typewriter had just worn out its historical moment. It was an atrophied religion. And that was certainly a widely shared opinion in the first generation of assimilation, that now to modernize was no insult to the Jewish tradition, but its natural outgrowth was Protestantism, which is why most of the Mendelssohn religious music, whether it's Lobgesang or Paulus or Elijah, are in fact very focused on not the Trinity so much, but on the continuity between a monotheistic, abstract God of justice and humanity and light and truth. So it is, in my view, a Judaicizing of Protestant theology through music.
Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy soon became an acknowledged symbol of assimilation and came to occupy a special place in the development of a specifically German musical culture. A culture in which music was seen as an expression of the very best in human nature, of humanity and light and truth. Music was thought to have a significance beyond race or creed, beyond what could be expressed in words, and so beyond what could be tainted by words. Above all, music was understood to have an implicitly spiritual content, a conviction powerfully reinforced when Mendelssohn rescued Bach's St. Matthew Passion from 100 Years in the Dark, and then became widely identified with it.
Edward de Vriend, a close friend of Mendelssohn's who took the part of Jesus in their first performance of the St. Matthew Passion, recalls an incident in the Opera Square in Berlin. We discussed the wonderful coincidence that exactly 100 years must have passed between the last Leipzig performance and when the St. Matthew Passion would again see the light of day. And, cried Felix exuberantly, suddenly stopping in the middle of the Opera Square, that it should be a comedian and a Jew boy who restore to the world the greatest Christian music. Felix usually refused resolutely to refer to his Jewish origins, but on this occasion he was carried away by the happy mood and the striking nature of his observation.
Mendelssohn's reticence about his origins was characteristic of many converted Jews who, despite persistent anti-Semitism, felt more German than Jewish.
You know, they never believed. My grandfather, who came from a little town in Bavaria, they could trace their ancestry back to almost 600 years in this little town. 8 brothers were together in the First World War. All received the Iron Cross. Die meinen ja nicht mich, das sind die anderen Juden, aber erst bin ich Deutscher, dann bin ich Jude. That was the thing.
Und gerade, wenn wir jetzt also zurückkommen wollen auf Deutschland, die sogenannte deutsche Musik, wollen wir es mal dabei lassen, gerade die wurde dann für die deutschen Juden, ich spreche ganz bewusst jetzt von deutschen Juden, also aus denen ich herstamme,
ein ganz besonders wichtiger Punkt der Assimilation. Auch das war ein Teil des Aufgehen-Wollens im deutschen Volk, der Symbiose, der sogenannten Symbiose, die von Moses Mendelssohn und Lessing und anderer Aufklärer damals initiiert wurde. Und das wurde von den deutschen Juden gleich nicht nur 100%, sondern 1000% vollbracht. Und gerade das war der Grund für ihren Niedergang später. Denn diese Symbiose hat nur in unseren Köpfen stattgefunden. Sie hat nicht in den Köpfen der anderen Deutschen stattgefunden.
Moses Mendelssohn's dream of assimilation nevertheless remained a long time both vital and relatively untroubled, despite growing anti-Semitism, until Germany produced a revolutionary spirit in the form of Richard Wagner, who set alight a number of fires that are still burning to this day. Among them, an essay first published in 1850 under the pseudonym of K. Freigedank, Freethinker, that is the most aggressively anti-Semitic tract in the history of German music. Anti-Semitism was in the air, but this text was written by an artist whose music and whose influence had come to stay. Richard Wagner articulated and gave weight to a new phase of anti-Semitism, based not on religious dogma, but on social, aesthetic, and artistic criteria.
With the rise of German nationalism, an anti-Semitic movement was well underway. Wagner articulated it and gave it special twists, but he wasn't original. What he did was to make it really powerful. He was an excellent rhetorician. The great essay on Jews in music is a fabulously brilliant essay. Perverse, but it's brilliant. And therefore he was able, when he issued it first anonymously in 1850, he was able actually to capitalize on something people were saying. He didn't invent this.
Wagner was a prophet of German nationalism, quite openly, quite consciously. He admired Bismarck. He saw himself as a parallel to Bismarck. He exchanged letters with Bismarck as perdu, because they were both working towards the same end. They were both creating a greater Germany. But in Wagner's mind, the greater German art could only be created by removing those things that had formed him, those impurities, as he put it, that had formed him, those Jewish elements. So in that respect, regardless of its value as art, Wagner's music is quintessentially anti-Semitic.
Look, Wagner had very specific ideas about sound and about music expression. It so happens that many of the Jews who were musicians around the time were of a different idea. Therefore, Wagner's anti-Semitism, if you want, is also artistic. Wagner hated the lightness of music of Mendelssohn. Instead of saying, Wagner's mistake is not to say that Mendelssohn was a bad composer because he was Jewish. This is the fascistic element. Wagner should have said, Mendelssohn for me is no music because it lacks this, and this. This is the part of it.
But Wagner already puts a match into a room filled with kerosene. And that kerosene began to spill very aggressively in the early 19th century, particularly after the Battle of Jena. Because remember, the German Jews, all Jews in Europe, were extremely ambivalent, if not supportive of Napoleon Bonaparte. because Napoleon Bonaparte was viewed as philo-Semitic. So Napoleon became a kind of Jewish hero. But Napoleon then became the arch enemy of Germany, of England, and of the sense of national self-realization. So the issues of 18th century Enlightenment ideas and the conflict with 9th century nationalism caught the Jews in a very complex situation. In addition, Karl Marx wrote the other very important essay of anti-Semitism, in which he made the Jew as the ultimate capitalist. The Jew became the instrument of the destruction of a traditional world order, a rural world order, a world of family values, of all of this sort of right-wing rhetoric, cosmopolitanism, uprooted sort of high-minded, abstract intellectualizing as opposed to a kind of Blut und Boden sense of cultural identity. All of this works hand in glove, and Wagner exploits it shamelessly.
I think also that Wagner's level of anti-Semitism was also very low. It was a combination of so many things, a combination of jealousy, a combination of another attitude to music. I mean, of course, you cannot play the Italian Symphony of Mendelssohn like you play the first act of Siegfried, although both pieces have short notes. It is a completely different word. Now, is this Jewish? I don't know. This was just a stupid adjective. I mean, anti-Semitism, no matter how intellectual it is, remains a very basic and stupid trait, because it is generalization.
And yet, for all its stupidity and banality, the idea of anti-Semitism dominated Richard Wagner's mind as a mythical explanation of everything that he hated. And there was much that Richard Wagner hated. In Wagner's mind, the opposition is not only between the German and Jewish spirits. His reaction is also against modernity. He hated what he saw as the dissolution of the organic links in society, the rise of empty individualism, and the effects of industrialization. And because he sees these as abstract and impersonal forces, Wagner needs the Jew to give them identifiable features, and he coins the term Verjudung, Judaization, a concept that had been waiting for a name. The Jew becomes the scapegoat. More than that, the Jew is not merely the figure which embodies all that is disintegrative in modernity, but its driving force. Money is the force behind the demonic spirit of manufacture, and the Jew controls money. The Jew is the personification of the economic principle and the art of vacuous entertainment. In particular, the grand opera of Meyerbeer that was to be swept away by Wagner's new music drama.
And one of the consequences of the whole Bayreuth enterprise, the publications around Parsifal, the Bayreuther Blätter, and Wagner's essays of the late 1870s, early 1880s, one of the consequences of all of those was a new version of Christianity called German Christianity, promoted by Hans von Wolzogen, the editor of the Bayreuther Blätter, close friend of Wagner. And this German Christianity drew on Wagner's writings and on Parsifal and promoted an Aryan Jesus, rejected Jewish teachings, rejected Jewish ethics, above all rejected the Hebrew scriptures, and promoted a kind of dynamism, strength, ultra-German right-wing nationalism and provided a very fertile seedbed into which Hitler could later plant Nazism.
Did Wagner's texts have any direct influence on Hitler's political consciousness?
No question at all. Not just on Hitler's consciousness, on the consciousness. Not just on Hitler's consciousness, on the consciousness of evolutionary German right-wing nationalism. I mean, Wagner's idea of anti-Semitism was, in a sense, of an anticipation of Karl Lueger's "Wer Jude ist, bestimme ich." He would decide who was Jewish, and if Hermann Levy was useful to him as a conductor, then for the purposes of his conducting, Hermann Levy ceased to be Jewish, even though his father was a rabbi. So it was an illogical and not a political or totalitarian anti-Semitism, but it was undoubtedly a legitimization of a secular anti-Semitism, which is something that had not existed in Europe before. We'd had clerical anti-Semitism. We'd had 2,000 years of the church preaching that the Jews had killed Christ and the Jews were therefore anathema, pariahs, and so forth. Wagner was a founding influence in the philosophy of secular nationalist anti-Semitism, and therein lies the danger.
Hitler himself said that whoever wishes to understand National Socialism must read Wagner's political writings. He also said that he had built up the foundations of his own religion on Wagner's Parsifal. Those are two very important statements.
Of course, what a composer thinks is important. And Wagner would have been the first to say that what he thought was more important than what he composed. He wanted to be seen as a philosopher and a liberator.
And so there was much in Richard Wagner for the Third Reich to draw on. Because there is no composer in the history of German music who commented more extensively or more energetically on his work and the ideas behind it than did Richard Wagner. His artistic production aims expressly and programmatically at nothing less than a redemption of mankind from the degeneracy of the times, by revival of an older, better world, and in the belief that the highest purpose of mankind is artistic. In his obsession with redemption, Wagner sees a redeemed, revolutionized world as a de-Judaized humanity. And he concludes his essay on the Jews in music with the thought that the only salvation for the Jewish mind lies in annihilation. But Wagner does not specify what form the destruction should take, and a highly charged debate about his intentions continues to this day, as does the debate about whether Wagner's music should be performed in Israel at all.
Wir kannten natürlich seine berühmte Schrift Das Judentum in der Musik, die mit den Worten endet, die Lösung ist der Untergang. Aber man hat versucht, das zu beschönigen. Man hat gesagt, er meint ja nicht den Untergang, sondern er meint, dass die Juden sich taufen lassen oder sowas oder so. So wie Ahasverus, sagt er doch. Also man hat irgendwie versucht, darum rumzugehen. Heute bin ich anderer Meinung. Heute glaube ich, das ist ein Codewort oder so, dass er genau den Untergang gemeint hat. Und so hat es ja auch auf Hitler gewirkt. Er war ja der geistige Einfluss auf Hitler und so. Das ist ja der Grund, weshalb der Bann gegen Wagner hier immer stärker wurde. Je mehr man eingesehen hat, wer Wagner war, und er war politisch und in seinen Meinungen war er ein Monstrum.
The 27th of October 2000, the Performing Arts Center in Rishon LeZion in Israel. This is the first programmed performance of a Wagner work by an official Israeli orchestra since the Nazi Kristallnacht in 1938.
fact that Hitler adopted Wagner as ideologist of the Nazism doesn't mean that he was the ideologist of the Nazism. And I think that in a way, when we play Wagner, we say to the Nazism, you don't own the music of Wagner. Maybe you own the man, but you don't own his music.
We'll never forget and we'll never forgive what the Nazis did to our people. What is the relation to Wagner music? I don't understand it. No one contact between them. Please put them apart. Don't connect them.
Part of the reason that many Israelis or Jews still have a resistance to Wagner is not only because of the suffering of the people from the camps who we want to respect. I am, by the way, for the normalization of Wagner. I have been for 30 years for playing Wagner here. But I understand the resistance. And part of the resistance is that people feel here that Wagner has not been normalized over there, that Wagner is still worshipped rather than played. We play Mozart, we enjoy Mozart. We play Beethoven, we go deeply into what he has to convey to us. But nobody worships a musician as Wagner is worshipped there. And it seems to me that to worship Wagner with everything that goes on with Wagner is an abomination. You cannot do that. Israelis and Jews, perhaps beyond Israel, has not come to terms yet in a normal way with the phenomenon Wagner. But everybody believes that the Germans have, and I believe they have not either. But I understand the resistance. Bayreuth was established by Wagner not only as a place of music, but as a shrine. And he had this idea of putting together art and politics, music as a messenger and as a fomenter of more than purely aesthetic and including political and social passion. This is how Bayreuth developed and degenerated into a musical shrine of politics.
And so the debate continues, and the association of Richard Wagner with the Third Reich persists. Wagner brought politics and racism into music, and something changed in the world. The Nazis then institutionalized racial hatred in a manner and to a degree that until the Third Reich was unimaginable. The world changed again, and the change called into question fundamental beliefs about art, about religion, and about humanity itself. The dream of unproblematic assimilation had shattered. In the words of Rabbi Leo Beck, a survivor of the Theresienstadt concentration camp, for us Jews from Germany, an historical epoch has come to an end. Such an epoch ends whenever a hope, a belief, a trust has finally to be buried. Our belief was that the German and Jewish spirits could meet on German soil and through their marriage become a blessing. That was an illusion. The Jewish epoch in Germany is over once and for all.
Ich war sehr glücklich, dass ich bleiben konnte, weil meine Mutter da war. Die war schon alt. Dann wurde sie wegtransportiert. Das war der tiefste Punkt meines Lebens. Meine Frau, 72. Lebensjahr, mit einem Rucksack am Rücken, allein. Mein Vater war schon tot. Sie war allein. Da fällt ein schwarzer Vorhang vor meine Augen. Das war fürchterlich. But I went through a very interesting thing. In my house, this was before deportation, were 3 or 4 Nazi families. And once I was practicing a lot in this time. After my mother left, I was in a very bad state, and I had to play. I couldn't. So I played for hours, and suddenly I heard a knocking on the floor, and I said, "Oh, the Nazis! It is. I disturb him. I will not play it now." So I stopped playing, and the woman who took care of our house came once and said, "Mrs. Sommer, Mr. Hermann, the name of this Nazi, asked me whether you are already deported. You stopped playing. He loves your playing," she told me. So immediately I was sitting down and played. But then when we were one evening, the last evening, sitting, already everything were packed, and the door was open, and the Nazi came and said to me, "Frau Sommer, ich sehe, Sie sind jetzt vor dem Wegschicken. Ich wünsche Ihnen das Beste, kommen Sie gesund zurück. Bleiben Sie gesund. Aber etwas kann ich Ihnen mit Sicherheit sagen. Ich bin Ihnen zu ungeheurem Dank verpflichtet. Ich höre stundenlang zu, wenn Sie üben. Mein Vater war ein Organist. Wir waren die ganze Familie sehr musikinteressiert. Und ich bewundere Sie und ich kann Ihnen nicht sagen, wie Sie uns auch in unserer Zeit jetzt geholfen haben durch Ihr Spiel. Hat mir gesagt.
Do you still practice now?
Yeah, of course.
How much?
This is my food. 2.5 hours.
How old are you?
98.
How many concerts did you give in Theresienstadt?
More than 100.
Nous sommes arrivés dans un camp le 8 mai 1943, vers 4 ou 5 heures du matin. Les portes du wagon se sont ouvertes et nous avons été éblouis par les projecteurs, affolés par les chiens et par les SS qui criaient « Alle raus, alle raus ». Moi, je tenais de ma main droite ma femme qui était enceinte de 8 mois. Et de ma main gauche, le violon, dont je ne me séparais jamais. Et je reçois un coup de bâton sur ma main gauche et sur ma main droite. Laisse ta femme avec sa mère et le violon, alles im Waggon lassen. Je l'ai laissé dans le wagon et je suis descendu.
Ich habe nie und wollte auch nie über die Fürchterlichkeiten reden, die man miterlebt hat dort. Das wollte ich nicht. Ich will es auch weiter nicht. Ich will nur sagen, also wenn ich sage, wir haben nicht gegessen, so muss man mir das glauben. Früh war ein schwarzes Wasser, das war Kaffee, Mittag ein weißes Wasser, das war Suppe und Abend wieder das schwarze Wasser. Wir waren also Haut und Knochen. Die Frauen haben die Menstruation selbstverständlich verloren. Aber, also es sind ja Tausende gestorben natürlich an Typhus und wir waren eigentlich gesund. Diese Musiker, die waren vielleicht 20 Leute, ausgezeichnete Musiker, erstklassige, Composers sowie Performers. Wir waren eigentlich gesund. Und das ist natürlich die Folge von, weil wenn man gewusst hat, man spielt abends, so war man glücklich. Man war glücklich.
Quand le chef de blockältester, le soir de notre arrivée, a demandé est-ce qu'il y a parmi vous quelqu'un qui connaît la musique, et spécialement Geige, le violon, moi, je n'ai pas parlé. Parce que je ne concevais pas qu'on parle de musique dans un concentration camp. L'absurde et la musique, c'est pas possible, ça va pas ensemble. Et quand le blockältester, j'étais obligé, à cause de mes camarades, de faire un pas et de dire je joue du violon, il m'a dit tu vas recevoir 5 coups de bâton parce que c'est du sabotage, t'as pas voulu dire. Maintenant, je veux contrôler si tu es violoniste. Je veux te donner un violon. Je lui dis, j'ai pas de violon. Je veux te donner un violon. Et il m'a donné un violon et il m'a dit, c'est un ordre. You must play. Et je lui dis, what do you want? Beethoven, Mozart, Handel, Haydn, Schubert, Schumann. He told me, you know, ohne Noten, Schubert and Beethoven and Mozart and this, ohne Noten? Jawohl. Ich sage, jawohl. Play, what do you want? And I began to play the concerto von Mozart in A-dur, La majeur. Perhaps you know it. La, mi, do, la, mi, pa-ram-pa-pa-pa-pam. It's very brilliant, very good concert. I played about 10, 12 minutes, and all around my comrades were pleurer. And after he comes and he makes me so, stop. You play really very good. And I hope you will not sterben hier. Tu ne vas pas mourir ici, j'espère. Ich sage ihm, on n'est pas venu pour mourir. He told me, you don't know what is a concentration camp. C'était l'enfer, l'inferno de Dante. voi che entrate qui lasciate ogni speranza. Et ils m'ont envoyé tout de suite au conservatorium. À Birkenau, comme à Auschwitz, il y avait un conservatorium. Et c'était ça, l'extraordinaire pensée absurde des SS, musique dans une concentration, dans un camp de concentration.
Denn in Auschwitz war ich die einzige Listin im Frauenorchester in Auschwitz. Und ich meine, es ist ganz einfach zu erklären, solange man ein Orchester haben wollte, hat man uns nicht in die Gaskammer gesteckt. Aber die Gaskammer war immer vor der Nase, nicht wahr?
Ich erinnere mich, im Winter haben wir in den Wintermänteln mit den Hüten am Kopf und hohen Stiefeln, das war eiskalt, aber wir haben doch gespielt. Wie wir das gemacht haben, das weiß ich. Jedenfalls, wir haben doch gespielt und die Leute waren in diesem eiskalten Raum gesessen. Es war eigentlich wie eine Kirche oder ein Tempel oder eine Moschee. Unbeschreiblich.
The remarkable thing about the orchestra is that it was directed by Alma Rosé. Alma Rosé was the daughter of Arnold Rosé, who was the leader of the Vienna Philharmonic and had the famous Rosé quartet, and she was the niece of Gustav Mahler, and she was herself a fantastic violinist. She arrived in the camp, she was in the experimental block, just about to be experimented upon, when it came out that she was a violinist, and somehow she landed in Birkenau shortly before I arrived, thank God, and she was given the task to make an orchestra. Jetzt sprechen wir Englisch. Das schadet nichts, ne? Ja. Also wir haben gespielt Sachen wie Operetten, ja, was damals so Mode war, und Zara Leanders Lieder. Wir hatten einige Sängerinnen. Es war ein vollkommen verrücktes Ensemble, aber unsere Hauptaufgabe war, Märsche zu spielen. Märsche früh und abend für die Tausende von Menschen, die ausgemarschiert sind, um in den Fabriken zu arbeiten, die um das Lager herum waren, nicht wahr? Die famous slave labor. Und solo habe ich, also mein Claim to Fame ist, dass ich die Träumerei von Schumann für Dr. Mengele gespielt habe. Dr. Mengele ist der berühmte Arzt, ja, der mit den Zwillingen experimentiert hat. Und anscheinend ein Musikliebhaber kam zu uns in den Blog und wollte die Träumerei von Schumann hören.
Und hast du das für ihn privat gespielt?
Nein, mit Orchesterbegleitung. Wir hatten ein Arrangement. Nein, wir haben da gesessen in dem Block und haben geprobt. Und dann der SS kam rein, manchmal 2, 3, manchmal nur einer, um sich ein bisschen Musik anzuhören, um sich zu erholen von der Arbeit, die sie draußen gemacht haben, Leute in die Gaskammer stecken.
I am a survivor of Theresienstadt, but you can't compare the survivors of Auschwitz, for instance. This was undescribable. This is... So these people went through the hell. Even the first year in Theresienstadt, we didn't know about Auschwitz. In the second year, we knew. And they wanted to make gas cameras in Theresienstadt as well. They started already, but it didn't finish. Und um das zu beschließen, sage ich nur, wenn wir gespielt haben, war es wie ein Gottesdienst oder so etwas. Da war man nahe dem Göttlichen, wenn wir spielen durften, und ebenso die Zuhörer.
Wir haben dort gesessen mit einem Todesurteil auf uns drauf. Heute lebst du, morgen vielleicht nicht. Jetzt sollst du das spielen, spielst du es. Ich glaube, das wäre ein Luxus gewesen, da zu viel zu sitzen, zu analysieren. Das war eine Es war eine Existenz von einer Minute auf die andere. Wir wussten, dass heute oder morgen oder übermorgen gehen wir rein und kommen als Rauch raus. Also es gab gar keinen Zweifel da eigentlich daran, nicht wahr?
Theresienstadt war der Beweis des Zaubers der Musik. Ich kann es nicht anders bezeichnen. Es ist etwas ganz Eigenartiges, wie Musik auf die Seele des Menschen wirkt. Es ist das Schönste, was das Menschenleben bringen kann. And I must say, till my last days, I am 98 years old, it helped me and it made my life beautiful. Beautiful. Even in the very, very difficult times, it made me really happy.